Good evening, I'm Jim Whaley. Tonight is a great pleasure to welcome back to Cinema Showcase, after much too long an absence, one of the great stars of Hollywood and Broadway, Miss Alexis Smith. She's had a number of great films to her credit and wonderful plays on Broadway, and her latest theatrical venture is Rodgers and Hart's Pal Joey. Join me as I talk with Alexis Smith tonight on Cinema Showcase. Thank you very much for joining Cinema Showcase. And right now, join me in welcoming back Alexis Smith. It's good to see you again.
Thank you, Jim. Nice to be here.
After having been away much too long, you're going to have to visit Atlanta more often.
Well, I like the city, so hopefully we'll be back soon.
Well, good. You're doing Pal Joey now, which is in every sense of the word a true classic.
Yes.
Of Broadway, later made into a film. Is it fair to say that they don't write musicals like that anymore?
I disagree. Well, certainly to a degree, I would say. However, I think perhaps you're referring to Rodgers and Hart, and I certainly think that Stephen Sondheim compares very favorably to Rodgers and Hart. I mean, he embodies the two in one, and I personally think he's the genius of our time, and I think that his lyrics are superior to Hart's because they're. I think Steve, well, it's it's advanced since that time. Perhaps if Hart were writing today, he would write as Steve does, or perhaps Steve is the reincarnation.
Sure.
I don't know.
Sure.
I don't know which. But Steve has such great wit in his lyrics and profundity as well, and so I think anything Mr. Sondheim does is comparable to anything in the past.
You know, what's interesting about Stephen Sondheim, one of the many interesting things, is that he was almost brought up in many ways by Oscar Hammerstein, as
yes.
you know. And I remember a story one time where he said he tried to write a lyric in the Oscar Hammerstein manner, and Oscar Hammerstein told him, "This is terrible," he says, "because you're trying to write like Oscar Hammerstein,
Yes.
write like Stephen Sondheim." And it's been certainly proven that the Sondheim style is quite memorable.
Oh, he's brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
What do you think, though, gives Pal Joey the incredible staying power it has?
I think the piece was very much ahead of its time because the hero is an anti-hero, and that's just been a recent phenomenon in either screen or television or the theater. And certainly, when was it done originally?
I think 1940, 41.
Was it something like earlier than that? I guess because Gene Kelly, yes, of course, played Joey. And at that time, musicals were always up pieces with a happy ending, and to have these savory characters in a musical was really quite revolutionary.
Yeah. The manner in which Rodgers and Hart composed their music was interesting because it was a style that changed, I think, when Rodgers went to work with Hammerstein. I think with Hart, the lyrics usually came first,
yes.
and then with Hammerstein it was the other way around.
Oh, was it?
I believe.
Yes, I'm not...
But some of those songs in Pal Joey, my goodness, when you think about all the... if there's anybody out there who is not familiar with Pal Joey, just name some of the songs in that
Well, I could write a book, which is a beautiful, beautiful song, and Bewitched, Bothered and Bewildered, which I suppose is the best known of the songs in the piece. And of course, at the time it was first done, and when one thinks 41, I mean, it was just... Everyone considered it outrageous, and some of the lyrics which we have incorporated, which we are now using in the show, were not used in the show at that time because they figured they were too raunchy.
Yeah,
you know?
that's right. That's right.
And were shocked by it.
What about the character you play now? Was this, you've played so many different kinds of women in films and on the stage. Was this particular role a challenge for you?
Well, it's something that so many people have said over a period of years that I should do. So when it came up this summer, I said, well, I may as well do it and get it out of the way, and then I don't have to go through the thing again of saying, oh, you should do Pal Joey. And in a way, yes, except she is, sophisticated, which I seem to be playing frequently, and she is a rich woman. It's funny. When someone asks me about a character, they say, what kind of character are you playing in this? And I'll say, well, I play this very rich woman, and it occurs to me I don't think I've ever said anything else, you know.
You have always, really, well, I won't say always, because but you have, in large part in Hollywood and on the stage, played characters who had money.
Yes, that's true.
How do you suppose that got started? I mean,
I don't know. Well,
somebody looked at Alexis Smith and said, she looks like she has
rich.
money.
I don't know. I think a great deal of it has to do with my height and the term statuesque, which has been sort of attached to me, which I don't feel that way at all personally. I don't think I'm anything like that lady that I seem to play frequently, because it's a certain kind of bored sophistication in certain aspects, which I find very uninteresting. I don't like her when I meet her, so. But I think one's very physical being naturally has a great deal to do with how you're cast.
Yeah.
And that seems to have affected my career.
What kind of a condition do you think Broadway and the whole American musical theater really is in today? Is it in a healthy state as far as new works?
Not this season, certainly. But I know when I did Follies, the theater was not in very good shape, and everyone said, well, Broadway is dying. I said, it can't, I just got here, you know. So now we're hearing all that, those, you know, the gloom and doom again. And within the time since Follies, you know, there have been some very, very healthy and very productive seasons. And certainly if all these, you know, negative people who think negatively about it were true, it would have died with the Greeks, you know, and it's been really doing rather well for a few hundred years.
I think they say Broadway's dying every couple of seasons.
Yes,
don't they?
yes. There seemed to be a dearth of new material. The major problem, of course, is economical, and it is just so. Follies couldn't be done today. It would be economically unfeasible to do that show, because when we did it, which was 1971, I think, it was the most expensive musical that had ever been done at that time.
Incredibly lavish.
Yes, and it cost, I think, $1 million. It was a little over $1 million, and everyone was in a state of shock because of the expense of the show. Well, now they're $2, $3, $4 million, and when one considers that it could close in a night, that's a pretty risky investment.
Yeah.
And I think, and also as a result of that, the price of admission is extraordinary when it costs $45 a seat to go to the theater, and I think it's really unfortunate, because what happens is in production, they try to cut down as much as possible, and we will not see as many great lavish shows as we have in the past, because it's just simply such a terrible risk.
I wonder if that is going to change the admission price. Doesn't it seem like that will have to change in the future? Otherwise, who will be able to afford to go to the theater?
Well, I think that the major problem are unions. And I don't think the major problem are the truly creative people, because they, in so many instances, they are willing to take cuts, they're willing to take less money, they are willing to do anything to get a show on. And I remember at one time I was doing a play called The Women, and business was not as good as we had hoped it would be, and they called the entire company together and asked if we would take minimum wage in order to keep the show going, and perhaps, hopefully, that it would pick up momentum and would be successful. Now, according to equity, everyone has to agree to do that, everyone in the company, which indeed we did. And I came to work one day and I looked around backstage and I thought, everybody here is making more money than I am, And it is, so therefore that's unless the unions would make some kind of concession, I'm afraid that's what we're stuck with.
Something else, too, that bothers me for purely aesthetic reasons is the fact that they've been tearing down all these wonderful theaters in New York.
I just think it's shocking. When the Helmsley Hotel can be built over Random House, and that house saved and give the hotel a unique quality that it wouldn't have had otherwise, why Mr. Portman? Perhaps he isn't that talented. I'm not a Portman fancier. Is he from Atlanta? Well, the first hotel was here, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Well, I think those great round things that he's building that you can't find your room, are a blight on the landscape. And I really think that it is shocking that he and his cohorts or whoever was responsible for that cannot see to, build the hotel around the theater and save those wonderful theaters.
That's what I so admire about European cities, is that they will go out of their way
Yes.
to save something.
Yes.
Here it seems like we can't wait until something gets a little age on it to demolish it
I know.
and put up something new and ugly.
But you consider the theaters in London, those old,
Yeah.
hundreds of years old, and the Haymarket Theatre, which are jewels, and were built for acting. That's the purpose of the theatre. Whereas now, we build large community complexes that are supposed to accommodate a circus, an intimate play, a motorcycle race. I don't know, and it's unfortunate because it certainly hurts the artist
Yeah.
who's performing there.
That's something I want to touch on just for a minute, and I don't want you to name any names if you don't want to, but having played on Broadway in what I would assume to be acoustically sound places, and then touring with plays and where you have to perform in places less suitable,
Yes.
is that jarring for you?
It's an entirely new ball game now. I used to object to it strenuously. I felt that if one were an actor in the theater, that you should be able to project and fill the house, and that was part of your technique and your equipment. But there are two things that enter into it. A house the size of the Fox here in Atlanta, for example, 4,500 seats. Well, I doubt that Demosthenes could handle that. And also, the ear of the public has changed considerably, because when they're used to seeing television and film and then go to concerts that are so heavily mic'd, if they would come to the legitimate theater and hear a play as we used to see them without artificial amplification, I don't think they would accept it.
But I remember when that first started being done, there were so many accusations that people were being cheated, that they weren't hearing what they were really supposed to be hearing.
Well, it's true, it does distort, certainly. But on the other hand, it's not the best of all decisions, and an odd thing will happen, because, for example, in Pal Joey, where Joel and I will be wearing body mics, and the house will be mic'd, the theater itself will be mic'd, and the other characters in the play perhaps will not be wearing, body mics, and then, they'll be playing a scene over here and come and talk to you, and then somebody was saying the other night in a scene that Joel and I have, because we both had body mics out, but suddenly it was so loud, when we were talking to one another. But that has to do with that gentleman who sits out there and mixes all that stuff.
I do think they have to be awfully careful with that, because I remember a production here, in fact, a stage production of Gone with the Wind, the musical version of that, where everyone, of course, had the big hoop skirts and everything, which naturally brushed against some of the floor mics, and it was like a thunderstorm. I mean, whoever's doing the sound on those things has to be very careful. Or
yeah, it is a very difficult process.
And as you say, it's a new process, too. And
Yes.
I don't think they have all the bugs out of it yet.
And I have a funny story to tell you. We wear a pack that has all the, I don't understand it at all, but with the aerial and all that business, this is just the mic, and there is that pack that you have to put somewhere, in your body. Or Gwen Verdon, I heard once, she was doing Chicago, and just wore like a body stocking, practically nothing, and she put it in her wig, which was the only place it would go. So when I was doing Whorehouse, I had a dress that was very form-fitting, and I put it in the back of the dress. And somebody came backstage and asked one of the who knew one of the kids in the company, and said, "Does Miss Smith have a pacemaker?" They thought that was what it was.
Do you remember that reminds me of the movie Singing in the Rain, when
Yes.
Jean Hagen, when they were having to wire her for sound, and they had to find places to put the microphone. They were putting it in flowers on her shoulder, and she had to talk into her shoulder, and all kinds of wonderful things like that.
And then when they go off, it's really swell too, which can happen.
Jeez, it's like being plunged into total darkness.
But I think one of the difficulties, it's a trap really. I think if you depend upon it, then your energy level drops. Because, and I personally play the show the same way I would without a microphone, because I think it is a danger to rely on that.
You mentioned The Women a few minutes ago, which to me is one of the funniest plays and movies ever made.
Yes.
I did not have a chance to see the production you were speaking of. How closely did that follow the original?
Very closely, because Claire Booth Luce, who is a very formidable lady, came to our first first performance in Philadelphia. And I mean, if we said an if instead of a but, she was backstage correcting it. So we stayed very close to it. Well, that was, I did, you know.
Yeah. Did you ever have a chance to see the film version with?
Oh, yes. Yes, I did. I ran it before I decided to do the play because I'd really sort of forgotten it. And
I think some of the additions that Anita Loos and her script for that made for that film were just wonderful.
oh, she's a brilliant woman.
Oh, yes.
Yes, she really is.
Marvelous film. Of the plays you've done recently, since Follies, are there any particular favorites that, how was Whorehouse to do? Was that a fun show?
It was fun to do. It's not a particularly good show, I don't think. And we had a wonderful company, and the kids were just great, so I enjoyed being with them. And I found I hadn't toured in a long time, and I found that very interesting because in order to be able to spend maybe 2 months or a month in the major cities in the country and get to know it again was very interesting. And the dancing in it was marvelous. You know, I mean, the audiences really adored it. Critics were not too thrilled about it, but
well, it is not exactly one of the great song scores.
No, it isn't. It was just some Tommy Tune, I think, really made the contribution to it with the dancing that was exciting. And I know when we played here, it was so successful here. And playing in the Fox, when at the end of the show the applause was thunderous, it sounded like somebody made a touchdown in the last second of play, or something. You couldn't hear a thing. It was really wonderful.
I do want to spend some time talking about some of your wonderful films in Hollywood. And of course, we don't have time to talk about all of them. If you had to pick out a couple that to you today stand out as being among your best, what would they be?
I don't know because I don't watch them. Did that stop you guys?
Even if they're on the, do you make it a point to avoid them?
I'm not interested. And you know, I saw them when I made them. Most of them I thought were not. They were all right. Some of them, a couple of them, I think were quite good. And there are just so many more things I'm interested in. I mean, I'd rather read a good book than see an old movie that I'm in.
All right, let me rephrase the question. Looking back on that period in time, which everyone thinks of today as being the golden age of Hollywood, because there was so much talent under the roofs of the great studios during that period in time. What is your feeling about that whole atmosphere, looking back on it today?
Well, I'm one of the few who feels that the film industry is more exciting today than it was then. I mean, the few of my peers, certainly. It was under the iron control of those studio heads, of whom there were maybe 5 or 6, whatever. And any individual creative talent had to bow to their wishes. Today it's so wonderful that with independent producers that, you know, a young, really gifted person can get a movie that's made that perhaps is very controversial. I mean, none of that could have happened in the 40s. And I like that aspect of it, and I think that the demands are far greater for excellence. I mean, I'm talking specifically about the creative, you know, aspect of it, the artists involved. And people say, well, they don't make stars like they used to. Well, that's such nonsense. I mean, Al Pacino's a brilliant actor. Dustin Hoffman's a wonderful actor. Gandhi, oh, that guy. Oh, you know, that was a performance. And Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer wouldn't have hired him, I'm sure, you know, because he wasn't a standard, tall, handsome leading man. And I think with the advent of television that's filled that gap of mediocrity which is necessary for the great American public, that the films have moved into almost, in many instances, an art medium. And it has forced them to really do better product than just automatically turning them out and selling them.
What amazes me, though, to look in retrospect on Warner's, where you were under contract, or
Warner's
MGM,
did wonderful things.
is that not only did they have so many stars under contract, but in each department you would have so many extraordinarily talented people. I mean, like at Warner's music department, you had Ray Heindorf, and Eric Korngold, and Max Steiner.
Oh, God, yes.
And
those
so
lovely
many,
men.
So many wonderful people. And that to me kind of boggles the imagination when I think that all of these people were under contract 52 weeks a year,
yes,
doing these wonderful things.
Warner's was an extraordinary studio. I remember when I was first signed, I was kind of disappointed because I wanted to be at Metro where all the big stars were, you know. And over the years, the Warner product has stood up so much better than the pure escapist sort of thing that Metro did and Fox, because when you consider that the movie stars at Warner's were Bette Davis, Humphrey Bogart, George Arliss, Paul Muni, were essentially actors, which was what I'm talking about today, I suppose.
Yeah. Well, how did you feel? I know after spending a number of years at Warner's, you did go to Metro to make a picture with Clark Gable.
Yes.
How did that feel to finally get to Metro?
It was so pretentious. Oh my gosh. It really was. Because Warner's was a very democratic studio, you know, and Errol Flynn drove in his station wagon with his dogs, and Bette Davis drove in, and we were all made up in a, you know, in a big makeup department, and it was really very, very congenial and kind of a big family.
Yeah.
And Metro was, well, I remember I went to the makeup department one day, and my makeup man and hairdresser had come with me from Warner's to do the picture at Metro. And one of the makeup people asked my hairdresser where I was, and oh no, I had gone to my dressing room. She said, well, Miss Smith is being made up in her dressing room. And they said, well, where is it? And she said, well, it's in building A or something. And they said, oh, I didn't know she was that important.
Building
so
A, yes.
You know, really kind of star status thing there. And
I remember talking to someone who worked at Columbia for a number of years who related a story that whenever, for example, Rita Hayworth would come onto a soundstage for the day shooting, all the grips or whoever would say, you know, hi Rita, how's everything?
Oh, sure, yes.
But whereas if the same people at Metro had said to Norma Shearer, hi Norma, they wouldn't be working there the next day.
Yes, well, it was
Miss
the
Shearer,
same
you know.
thing, you know, at Warner's, and the guys from up high would yell and say, you know, hey Alexis, how's Greg, or you know, whatever. It was all, you know, really very, very friendly surrounding.
It's been often said that Bette Davis had to fight a lot to get the good roles that she did. Did you ever have any run-ins with Jack Warner?
No, I was a good girl and did what I was told. I was well behaved. Well, I was so surprised and excited about being an actress, you know, in movies that I was delighted with everything that was going on, and I didn't have that kind of drive that you know that Betty had. She's a very feisty lady.
What was she like at the time to work around, to be on the same?
She was very pleasant. Always very. She was very, very nice to me, I must say. One funny story. She did a film. The film was done called Mr. Skeffington, I think it was.
Claude Rains, yeah, wonderful film.
And Betty was supposed to do it, and for some reason they decided that she wasn't going to do it. There was some controversy there, and they decided to test me for it. Well, I said I was the utility girl on the lot. You know, if Ann Sheridan refused something, I did it. If Betty did, if Olivia did, if any of those people, you know, I always got the part. And I said, I remember saying one day, I'd really like to have something that was mine from the start instead of, you know, the cast-offs. Anyway, they decided to test me for Mr. Skeffington. And Betty said, I heard, Alexis, you know, she said, I heard they were going to, you know, that you made a test for that film. And I said, yes. And she said, I think that's perfectly ridiculous, don't you? I said, yes. She said, well, if I'm not right for it, you're certainly not right for it. And she was, well, she's a dynamic woman, and you know, and very opinionated and strong in her ideas, and good actress. I mean, she was so unique at that time.
Absolutely.
You know, to have not been a standard pretty girl and to come in with all that kind of.
I must ask you about the picture Night and Day, where you were partially the inspiration for the composition of a number of Cole Porter's songs.
Yes.
How did you feel at the time about working with a script like that? Because obviously, all right, the movie had wonderful production values and the music was beautifully done. I think Heindorf's arrangements were marvelous and all of that. But obviously everybody knew that the script was not entirely faithful to the life of Cole Porter. Did that seem to bother anyone at the time?
Well, at that time, of course, one could not have filmed the life of Cole Porter.
Yeah, well.
And so there, and again, those biographical films were rarely accurate, because they would pick some kind of, say, flamboyant character, a really interesting character, and then you know, run into a stone wall because a certain aspect of their life that really made them interesting was impossible because of censorship to shoot. So I don't think that The same thing was true, I think, with the Gershwin picture.
Yeah, Rhapsody in Blue. Yeah.
And I don't think it disturbed anyone too much. Again, it would today. It would today, but and that's what I mean is better, really better today. If those things were made again and we really knew about the people, they'd be far more interesting.
Yeah.
As opposed to that just, you know, escapist glossy.
Sure. We've only got a minute or two left, and I wanted to ask you about a marvelous director you worked with in the past few years, Marty Ritt, who is one of my favorite filmmakers. You did Casey's Shadow with him.
Yes.
What was that like?
It was a wonderful experience because of two men, Marty and Walter Matthau. And I said, I'm in love with Walter Matthau, but the line is very long. He is such a delight and a joy to work with and such a good actor. And Marty is a wonderful director. And he doesn't have an ego that gets in the way of the piece, you know. I mean, it's the film, and he's sensitive. He was an actor, Marty was with the
I wonder
group theater.
if that helped in some way.
I think it does. I don't think all actors can be good directors, but I think if they have had that kind of experience and background, and Marty I know has taught as well, so he really is very, very sensitive to the actor's problem and is wonderfully supportive.
And unlike Michael Curtiz, you can understand what he says, can't you?
Yes. Oh, Mike was wonderful too, but in a very different way. Now, Marty's extraordinary, and I would love to work with him again.
Yeah. Well, I hope you do. We are out of time. This has been a very fast half hour.
Well, thank you,
And
Jim.
I wish you continued success with Pal Joey.
Thank you.
And I hope to see you right back here again soon.
Yes, I'd like to come back.
Thanks very much.
Bye-bye.
My thanks to all of you. Until next time, good night.